Let's start with the year that was. We just finished 2025. What were some of the most significant things that you were involved in Columbia this past year that you feel good about?
I got appointed to the South Carolina DOT Modernization Committee. And in this committee, we had a series of statewide meetings that were all over the state. What they were set up to be was to be a listening tour of the general public and mayors and council members and other people throughout their communities in that respected area to find out their issues and looking at ways that we could maybe modernize the DOT system, because it's basically trying to cut down on the bureaucratic red tape of why the projects are going so slow in the approval process, as well as trying to look at ways to secure additional monies in other areas that maybe there's some opportunity. And one of those is when we get back into Columbia, the first part of the session we'll have a bill put together that's cumulative ideas of some of those things. The one that I had was right now for EVs. If an individual lives in South Carolina and has an EV, then they pay additional. They pay $60 extra a year for a 2-year tag because they're not paying gas tax. So that helps put that in. If you're out of state, and you are driving from North Carolina to Georgia, you drive through South Carolina, you stop at one of these charging stations. None of that money for the charging goes back to the state. I know other states do, that there's an opportunity for us to collect a little bit of tax off that individual that's driving through the state and using to put money back into the state system. So that's just one of them. And there's many others that are going to be involved in that. But
it's been a challenge locally and statewide and nationally, really. But
part of the issue is that a lot of people don't realize the difference between the state roads, the city roads, and the county roads. Same with the bridges. I think there's 1,550 miles of county maintained roads. There's about the same or a little bit more of the state roads that are maintained. But there's like 500 bridges in Anderson County. That's just in Anderson County alone. Like if you look at the state roads, just in District 8, Highway 24 on the other side of the bridge to the county line, 187, the entire length, north and south, has been paved. Right now, currently, all 19 miles from the Georgia line to exit 19 is being paved on Interstate 85. Those are all state roads that have been paved by the state. And then, of course, 85 has got some federal money that's tied to that. Throughout the state, we've been doing a lot of work with the monies that we've got. I think the key is we've got to figure out a way, and part of this modernization bill that we're going to propose is one of the ideas that I had is that I'd like to see more money go back to the CTCs. 3.99 cents of the 28.75 cents goes to the CTCs. Well, then the way that state law is written is that 1/3 of that money has to be used on state roads. I would like to see the state roads, that CTC money, be increased, and then the state position part of it, the third, go away, and let the state deal with the state roads, the county do with the county roads. There's roadside maintenance of the mowing of the interstates and the county roads and the way stations. There's just a variety of things that money goes toward, not just paving roads. And so, but that's part of what we're trying to do, is to reestablish what those parameters are and then how we can better utilize the money and fast track some of these projects to make them happen a little faster.
So it's a lot more complicated than some people just want to make it simple.
I feel like it's a lot different looking in than when you're in the inside looking out, because you're more privy to more information. But my key is to try to help everybody that calls me if they have an issue about something, is to try to help educate them. And if I don't know the answer, I try to get them the answer. The goal is to try to improve what the county's getting. Because I think at the end of the day, I think some people say that the county wastes the money or, mismanages it or whatever. And I'm sure there's a little bit of that everywhere. I mean, I'd be naive to think that there's not some of that, but not as much as they attest to it be.
And the documentation is public. People can look at where the money and where it's being spent and how it's being used.
School tax and the other property taxes and other things that we pay. It is. I can see why it weighs hard on a lot of people about another penny. About 30% of the money was going to be coming from people that don't live in South or in Anderson, and I felt like that was probably the best case scenario of what we could have. When at the end of the day, I think what's going to happen is the only opportunity is going to be that you're going to have to raise millage, and I'm not for that because it's going to affect everybody. It affects 100% of the people,
and it doesn't raise as much money anyways.
It's just a portion of what we could have raised, but the people voted against it, and I'm good with that, and we just got to find other ways to try to do the roads. My goal is that I've been pushing to try to get roads in Anderson County and in my district paved when it comes to state projects. And so, fortunately, we've had a lot paved in this area, but there's still a lot roads to be maintained. And I always tell people, especially the people that aren't from here, that the reason why we're in the problem we're in is because for 30 years, South Carolina bragged that they were the cheapest gas tax in the United States, and they only had enough money to patch and repair when they could, not resurface.
Right.
And now we're having to pay for the problem. Construction cost has doubled since COVID, and since then, the same is applied for roads. Then we're compounded where we used to have four contractors who would bid the projects. Two of them were bought out by two of the other contractors, so now we were down to two. And in some cases on the CTC, we were getting one bid on the project. And so there was a couple of projects that we just didn't move forward with because we felt like it wasn't competitive enough. The more South Carolina has in the pot to pave roads, you're going to see some of those contractors moving back in to the area to try to, because a lot of them moved to North Carolina and Georgia when the gas tax was so low, and because they knew there wasn't money there long term.
Tell me a little bit about your philosophy in balancing serving your district and then looking at the big picture of the state as a whole. When you look at a bill or look at being part of something, how do you kind of measure that out?
This is what we receive, which is a list of all the bills, and it's front to back,
right.
And there's about 3 to 4 on every page. I take the time, and I've done this since my first year. I take the time and I literally flag the bills, and I color code them, and I usually have a coding system that it's one color if I really like it when I read the synopsis, and then another one if it's interesting but I need to know more about it, and then the third one if it's something that I've either co-sponsored already or something that I'm adamantly want to watch and make sure it doesn't get past me, because I'm opposed to it. And then once I go through this sheet, then I go to the computer and I type in the bill number and I read the entire bill. I learned early on, people told me that whatever you do, don't co-sponsor a bill that you didn't read completely. Because a lot of times in these bills, they'll word it and they'll say, well, that sounds pretty good, co-sponsor it. And then something will happen that in the bill, it'll have something pretty bad in it. I approach everything positively first. I tend to try to look at the positives in a bill or in somebody I meet, and I try to look at the similarities we may have, and then maybe get into the discussion of the differences or the issues that need to be resolved and fixed. That's just the way I think I was elected to do, is to make sure I understand what the bill is and where it's going to go. I serve on LCI, which is Labor, Commerce, and Industry. As a 30 plus year business owner, the speaker appointed me to that position, and I love it. It's right up my alley. I feel like I give a lot of contribution to that committee, but there's like education and judicial and 3M, and so, but it's hard to get to all of them. The good thing is they're recorded, so you can go back and watch some of them, or watch all of them pretty much. Part of the other process is you got to find people down in Columbia that have similar morals and characteristics and values that you have, you got to say, can you give me, your synopsis of this? And then you can read more about it and understand a little bit more about how that occurred and what happened in the committee. Because things happen quickly down there. It's once it goes through the committee, once it gets to the House floor, there'll be some will have debate, some won't, some will have more than others. So
Do you think your years on city council helped you prepare for the constituent service part of this? I mean,
absolutely. All of them are my constituents. So I'm here whether you voted for me or not. I'm gonna try to help you any way I can, because that's what you're elected to do. I want people to call me if I can help them with something state related. And if it's not state related, I get a lot of calls about the county. And I'll reach out to the county officials and say, can you reach out to this individual? They got an issue with such and such.
what are some of the other things this past year you feel good about that you worked on and were part of getting passed this year?
I mentioned the co-sponsoring, like what I do with this packet that I do every year. 8 bills that I co-sponsored that passed the House. Now, unfortunately, several of them stalled in the Senate. The first one was the 4216, cutting of government spending, delivering over $400 million in tax relief, moved the personal income tax rate from 6.2 to 3.9. Our goal is to get that down to a flat tax of 1.99 and eventually doing away with it. And this is one that, because I serve a lot of the lake, right now your tax on your boat is 10.5%, which I'm not sure how arbitrarily that got to be 10.5%. But I co-sponsored a bill that reduced the tax from 1.5% for the next 3 years to get it back to 6% is what your other rates are on your car and other things. Unfortunately, that stalled in the Senate. 3021, which is Small Business Regulatory Act, it passed. I co-sponsored it. It passed the House, but unfortunately stalled in the Senate. We did a hospitality tax for liquor liability. I had a lot of discussion. There were some other parts of that bill that ended up getting tossed out that I think are going to be addressed this year, which has to do with home builders and some other tort reform. So, but it passed. It did pass into law. South Carolina, with the economy, we had an issue that we've had with our energy. We've had a lot of businesses move into the area. So I co-sponsored 3309, which is the South Carolina Energy Security Act that expanded the generation capacity. Also gave some incentives for private involvement, and that passed into law as well. 3927, which was educational opportunities for removing DEI and making it more in public schools and colleges to try to get it back to allowing for you to your actual education and knowledge about what you're doing, not anything else. The teacher pay raises, 4025, that was part of the budget for teacher pay raises. Something we've done pretty much all 3 years I've been down there. I think it's increased over the last several years. It's increased it substantially. I think the goal is to get it to 50,000 for starting pay raises for starting salary for a teacher. Public safety things, I co-sponsored 2 different bills. 3127, which increased penalties for people who flee law enforcement. That passed into law. Hands-free driving, I co-sponsored that because I felt like it's almost like another distracted driving DUI kind of thing.
Behind other states on this too. I mean,
Correct.
Georgia's been doing it for 10 years or longer, maybe.
I drove an ambulance in high school and part of college and saw a lot of horrific accidents that, I just think it's something that you could probably wait, but where you're getting to before you get on the phone. 3058, which was criminalizing the sharing of intimate images through AI generation. Property rights, it stalled in the Senate. I did co-sponsor it though, as well as 3930, Second Amendment Financial Privacy Act. It stalled in the Senate, but one that did was the storm recovery, public health, and rural infrastructure was 4025. It passed into law because, we had Helene that come through and devastated a lot of our state, making sure we had monies available for them to be able to do the proper cleanup. That right there is 8 bills that I co-sponsored just because I read in advance. Some people don't co-sponsor anything and until it comes to them. If it comes to me on the floor, I really usually just say, let me take a minute and read it because I want to read the whole thing.
What about this year? What are your priorities for this year?
I think the big one that I'm going to be interested to see the outcome of is what the final bill will be for the modernization of DOT, because obviously roads and bridges are a big issue for South Carolinians and locally and statewide. I mean, we're not the only ones with the problems. Pretty much most of the upstate and some of the Midlands and a lot of the lower part of the state has the same issues. I was going to mention real quick that I think the governor just put out a statement that he's in his budget proposing $1.1 billion towards addition to funding of roads and bridges, which in that budget, one of the things that's outlined is the widening of I-85 from the Georgia line to 19. So that would mean all of Anderson County would be a 3-lane on both sides. They're saying that it would be, I think, 2035 before that would actually happen. We want to address juvenile crime because that keeps increasing. We want to figure out some ways of accountability prevention and meaningful reform for that. The insurance reform. Liquor liability was one thing, but I think the other is to see, there's some issues with the builder licensing side of it that there's not really an end because there's a loophole that the attorneys found that can basically put the builder on for life. And because maintenance becomes an issue of how well the house is maintained, tort reform and some other things with lawsuits and things like that. So that's one of the other major items. Student privacy and student safety is for parental rights is really important. That's going to be coming up. Want to continue to make sure that we strong understanding of the DEI bureaucracy and focus truly on the merit-based system. Sale and distribution of hemp is something that we've got to talk about and we've got some bills coming up because there's some hemp drinks now that found a loophole. I also reintroduced my bill about kratom. It's an addictive. It acts like an opioid. But we passed originally the Senate version of my bill that I introduced my first year, which was to put it behind the counter because it was in front of the convenience store's counter. Anyone could buy it. Now it's behind the counter and it has to be labeled accordingly. But the part that I've wanted to change about it is it has in the current bill, it has that you can have a synthetic form of it. It can't be fully synthetic, but something is 99%, it's not fully. And so I think that fully needs to go away. So that's what I have reintroduced.
On the hemp thing, though, are you going to try to look at the farmers who were given,
yes,
permits to do legitimate use of?
Yeah, this is more about hemp drinks.
Right.
The goal is to protect people unknowingly drugging themselves by drinking a drink that they think is harmless because it's sold in a convenience store. It's the same way with I think kratom. People were buying it in a convenience store and they were saying, well, I bought it in a convenience store. It's legal. The other thing that I think they want to look at that I'm very interested in is higher education tenure. Just because you've been there for a certain time doesn't mean you can coast. And so we want to make sure we keep the standards up, especially in our college. If it's a private institution, it's different. But if it's a public institution, we need to make sure we have a handle on that. I tried my best to put out a weekly newsletter that gives what we talked about and what we reviewed that week and what's coming up for the following week. And I was pretty successful at doing that almost every week of last session. I send it out through an email blast. So if you're interested in it, feel free to give me a call anytime at 864-940-6676 and leave me your email address and your your physical address if you want to, and I can enter it in. But the email address is what I would need. At the end of the day, I enjoy doing this. It's something completely different than what I've done for the last 40 years in architecture and construction. But I love doing it. I love Anderson County, and I really want to make sure I listen to my constituents and hear your concerns, and feel free to contact me anytime. And if I can help in any way, I'd be glad to do so.